My boyfriend's father called me street garbage at dinner. And that one sentence destroyed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and respect. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name's Lena, I'm 26, and I grew up in a small town with my mom, who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Life wasn't fancy, but it was honest. When I met Eli, I thought I'd finally found someone who saw beyond my background. He was kind, soft-spoken, and made me feel safe. We dated for almost a year before he invited me to dinner with his family. He said his dad was a little old-fashioned, but I had no idea what that really meant. When we pulled up to their house, my hands were shaking. It wasn't a house, it was a mansion, all white marble and glass, like something from a magazine. Eli looked calm, but I could tell he was nervous too. His mom, Diane, opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She hugged Eli, then gave me a polite nod, like she was greeting someone at a business meeting. Dinner started quiet. The table was long enough to seat 20, and I sat there trying to use the right fork, feeling completely out of place. Dean, Eli's father, watched me the whole time. His eyes were sharp, the kind that made you feel small even when he wasn't saying a word. "So, Lena," he finally said, cutting into his steak, "what do your parents do?" "My mom's a nurse's aide," I said, smiling politely. "It's just me and her." He raised an eyebrow. "No father?" I shook my head. "He left when I was little." Dean laughed under his breath. "Figures." The air went cold. Diane's eyes dropped to her plate. Eli stayed quiet. I tried to ignore it, tried to stay polite. But it only got worse. Dean asked about where I went to school, what neighborhood I lived in, and whether my mom still rents. Every answer I gave seemed to disgust him more. Finally, he leaned back, sipping his wine. "Eli," he said, "you really found yourself some street garbage, didn't you?" I froze. For a second, I thought I misheard. Then I saw the smirk on his face, the way Diane looked away, embarrassed. My heart pounded in my ears. I looked at Eli, waiting, begging for him to say something. But he didn't. He just sat there, staring at his plate like a scared child. I felt the heat rise behind my eyes. I wanted to yell, to throw something, to demand respect. But instead, I stood up slowly, placed my napkin on the table, and said, "Thank you for dinner." My voice barely held together. As I walked out, I heard Dean chuckle. Eli didn't follow me. Not that night, not even the next day. That was the moment I realized silence can cut deeper than any insult. And his silence told me everything I needed to know. I walked out of that house with tears stinging my eyes, hoping Eli would come after me. He didn't. I stood by my car for a few minutes, waiting, but the front door stayed shut. My chest felt tight, like the air had turned to smoke. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. An hour later, Eli called. His voice was soft, careful, like he was the one who'd been hurt. "Lena, please don't take what my dad said so seriously. He just has a temper." I let out a shaky laugh. "A temper?" "He called me street garbage, Eli." He sighed. "I know, but that's just how he is. He didn't mean it personally. You know how old school he can be." I sat there staring at the wall. "You sat there and said nothing," I whispered. "I didn't want to make it worse," he said quickly. "If I argued, he would have gone off on everyone. I just wanted to keep the peace." "Whose peace?" I asked. There was a long pause. I could almost hear him trying to find a way to make it sound okay, but there was no version of that night that could ever be okay. When I hung up, the silence in my apartment felt heavy. I sat on the couch, still wearing the dress I'd picked so carefully for that dinner. My mascara had streaked down my face. The humiliation burned, but underneath it, something darker started to grow: anger. The next day, my best friend Ray came over with coffee and a look that said she already knew everything. "You should have walked out the second he opened his mouth," she said, sitting next to me. "And you sure as hell shouldn't answer that boy's calls anymore." I nodded, but I didn't tell her the truth. That part of me still hoped Eli would show up, look me in the eye, and say the words I needed to hear. "I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you." Instead, he sent a text. "Can we just move past this? My dad won't apologize, but I don't want this to ruin us." I stared at those words until my eyes blurred. It hit me that Eli cared more about keeping things smooth with his father than respecting. That kind of love wasn't love at all. It was obedience. I deleted his message and tossed my phone aside. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. Every sound felt sharp: the hum of the fridge, the faint buzz of a streetlight outside. I lay down and closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind replayed that dinner again and again. Every cruel look, every second Eli stayed silent. By morning, the tears had dried. The sadness had settled into something colder, something steady. I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. I wasn't ready to walk away either. What I wanted now was understanding. I needed to know why he let it happen, and that meant I wasn't done. Not yet. Days passed, and I tried to quiet the noise in my head. Part of me wanted to believe Eli could make things right, that maybe the night had been a mistake. But something in him had changed. His words felt rehearsed, his apologies too smooth. Every time I asked about work or his plans, he brushed it off with quick answers that didn't add up. He claimed he was working late at the firm, but his clothes smelled like expensive whiskey, not printer ink. His stories never matched the hours. When I asked what project he was working on, he'd get defensive, like I was prying into something sacred. "You wouldn't understand," he said once, slipping his phone into his pocket when I leaned closer. "It's complicated business stuff." Still, he always had money, too much of it for someone who said he was starting from the bottom. Dinners at upscale restaurants, weekend getaways, new suits. I remember teasing him one night, asking if he had a secret gold mine. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Just good investments." But good investments don't explain how his bank card said Dean Holdings on the back. I saw it by accident when he handed it to the waiter. My stomach dropped. I didn't say anything then, but it stuck with me. A few days later, I ran into one of his coworkers while grabbing coffee downtown. A tall woman with kind eyes recognized me from Eli's photos. When I mentioned his firm, she laughed softly. "You mean his dad's company?" I blinked. "His dad's company?" She nodded. "Dean owns it. Everyone knows. Eli runs one of the smaller branches, but his father signs every check. Didn't he tell you?" I smiled weakly, pretending it wasn't news, but inside something cracked. On the drive home, my hands trembled around the wheel. All that talk about independence, about making his own way, it was all a lie. That night, when I brought it up, he looked almost insulted. "So what if my dad owns the company? I still work hard. I still earn what I have." "But you said you didn't take money from him," I said quietly. He scoffed. "You're making it sound like I'm some spoiled kid. You have no idea how much pressure he puts on me." His tone wasn't guilt. It was pride wrapped in self-pity. He didn't see the problem because, to him, there wasn't one. Dean wasn't just his father. He was his lifeline. Every decision Eli made was tied to keeping that approval. And suddenly, everything made sense. The silence at dinner, the excuses, the way he always looked for permission before speaking his mind. He wasn't afraid of conflict. He was afraid of losing his father's favor. I saw it then. He didn't want a partner. He wanted someone who would never question him, someone who would smile at the table and take the insults without protest, someone who would fit neatly into the shadow his father cast. I realized, with a bitter twist in my chest, that I'd never been that girl, and I never would be. I went to Eli's place with a heaviness in my chest that wouldn't go away. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say 100 times, but when I saw him standing there, calm as ever, the words came out sharper than I planned. "You lied," I started. "About your dad, your job, everything. You let me sit there and take that insult, and then you pretended it was normal." He crossed his arms. "You're overreacting again, Lena. My dad said something awful, I admit that, but you made it worse by storming out. You embarrassed me." I stared at him, stunned. "I embarrassed you?" My voice trembled. "You let your father humiliate me, and somehow I'm the problem?" He shrugged, his jaw tight. "You could have handled it differently. He's old-fashioned. If you'd just ignored him." I cut him off. "Old-fashioned?" He called me trash, Eli. "There's no excuse for that." He looked away, muttering something about family being complicated. The more he talked, the more I realized he wasn't sorry at all. He just wanted the situation cleaned up, neat and quiet, so he didn't have to feel guilty. Something inside me snapped. "I can't do this anymore," I said. "I won't be part of a life where I have to shrink to make you comfortable." He looked up, startled. "You're leaving?" "I already have," I said, turning toward the door. I drove home with tears blurring my vision, but this time, I didn't look back. That night, I blocked his number, deleted his messages, and packed away every trace of him. The silence afterward felt strange but clean, like I could finally breathe again. For weeks, I tried to move on. I went to work, saw friends, pretended I was fine. But sometimes, when the nights got too quiet, I caught myself thinking about him. The way he laughed, the way he used to touch my hair like I was something fragile. It hurt, but I forced myself to remember the truth behind that softness. Then one evening, a knock echoed through my apartment. I opened the door, and there he was, pale, red-eyed, holding a bunch of wilted flowers. "Lena, please," he said, voice cracking. "I've been a mess without you. I shouldn't have said what I did. I'll make it right." I stood there frozen. Every part of me wanted to slam the door, but his face, the guilt, the desperation, made me hesitate. "Eli, you broke something in me that night. I don't think you can fix it." He shook his head. "I can. I swear. Just give me one more chance." I should have walked away. I knew better. But the truth was, part of me still needed closure, some final answer that made sense of everything. So I let him in. We talked for hours, his words soft and careful, like he'd studied exactly how to sound sincere. I told myself it was one last try, but deep down, I already knew this wasn't forgiveness. It was the beginning of my exit. I wasn't staying. I was setting the stage to leave for good, this time on my terms. For a few weeks, things felt almost normal again. Eli acted different, gentler, more attentive, like he was trying to rebuild what he'd broken. He'd text me good morning, bring flowers, cook dinner. Part of me wanted to believe the effort was real, but another part stayed guarded. I watched everything he did, waiting for the cracks to show. And they did. It started with the late nights. "Work's been crazy," he said, kissing my forehead before heading out. The excuses sounded smooth, but too familiar. He stopped answering texts after certain hours, started keeping his phone face down on the counter, screen lighting up with messages he never mentioned. I noticed a name appear more than once, Macy. When I asked, he brushed it off. "She's just a co-worker," he said. "We're working on a client pitch together." His tone was too casual, too easy. Something in me sank. I'd seen that calm before, the same calm he wore when lying about his father's company. Days later, a small detail unraveled everything. His jacket smelled faintly of perfume, not mine. Sweet, floral, expensive. I didn't say a word, just watched him talk about meetings and deadlines, his eyes darting away whenever I asked a simple question. The truth came out when I ran into Ray for coffee downtown. She looked uneasy, then finally blurted, "Lena, I saw Eli last night. He was at that rooftop bar on 5th, with someone who definitely wasn't you." I went still. "Are you sure?" She nodded. Blonde hair, red dress. They were close. "I didn't know if I should tell you." The name clicked in my mind before she said it, Macy. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just felt something inside me shut off. Later that night, while Eli was in the shower, I scrolled through his phone. The messages were right there, months of them. Flirty, careless, full of inside jokes. My hands didn't even shake. I just read them one by one, realizing I'd never really known him at all. He came out of the bathroom, towel around his neck, humming like nothing had happened. I placed the phone on the counter. "How long?" I asked quietly. His face drained. "Lena, please, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He hesitated, searching for a lie that might work. But none did. His silence was enough. I didn't scream or throw anything. I just said, "You can leave now." He started to beg, but I'd already turned away. I didn't want explanations. I wanted distance. Later, I found out what made it worse. Dean knew. He'd met Macy, even approved of her. Someone at the firm told Ray that Dean called me, "not wife material." Those words burned more than Eli's betrayal ever could. That night, sitting alone on my couch, something inside me changed. The heartbreak settled into focus. I realized I'd spent too long letting other people decide my worth. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to wait for karma. I was going to create my own. Quiet, patient, and deliberate. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't belong in their world, I'd show them exactly what it felt like when that world started to crumble from the inside. I learned that anger burns out fast, but strategy lasts. Eli was predictable. His pride always pushed him to prove himself, especially to his father. That was his weakness, and I planned to use it. Dean's weakness was simpler, control. He needed everyone to see him as powerful, generous, untouchable. I wasn't going to fight them with noise. I was going to use silence and patience. A few weeks after cutting ties with Eli, I crossed paths with Nova at a downtown art exhibit. She introduced herself as Dean's business partner's daughter. She didn't know who I was, not really, and I didn't correct her assumption when she thought I worked in design. She was warm and genuine, nothing like the people I'd met in Dean's circle. We started talking about her upcoming volunteer work for one of her father's foundations. I listened carefully, smiling at all the right moments. Over time, we met for coffee, brunch, little walks through the city. Nova talked easily. She didn't gossip out of malice, just innocence. Through her stories, I started piecing things together. Dean wasn't as clean as he liked to appear. His charities weren't entirely charitable. Money from donations was quietly redirected into his private developments. He disguised personal gain as philanthropy. One afternoon, Nova mentioned something that caught my full attention. "Dad's really nervous about the gala next month," she said. "Dean's announcing a huge expansion project. It's supposed to be his big reputation move." I nodded, pretending to be casual, but my pulse quickened. "A charity gala?" "Yeah," she said, stirring her drink. "All his investors are coming. He's been polishing speeches for weeks. My dad says if this goes right, Dean's influence will double." That was the first time I saw my path clearly. I didn't need to shout, accuse, or expose anything directly. All I had to do was make sure the truth came out in the right room, at the right time. Every detail Nova shared built the picture. Where the funds came from, who handled the accounts, which documents were for show. She didn't realize how much she was revealing. I just asked gentle questions, nodding, never pushing too hard. She trusted me, and I made sure she never had a reason not to. In the evenings, I'd sit in my apartment surrounded by notes, piecing together everything I'd learned. Eli wanted validation, Dean wanted image. If either of them lost those things, their world would fall apart. The gala would be the perfect stage. I could already see it. The lights, the press, the crowd full of donors. Dean smiling at the podium, believing he'd built something grand. Then, the truth surfacing like a wave no one could stop. I didn't feel guilt, not even hesitation. For once, I wasn't the girl trying to fit in or survive their judgment. I was the one holding the match, waiting for the right moment to strike. And when it came, I planned to make sure both of them finally understood what it felt like to lose control. The night of the gala came faster than I expected. Nova had insisted I come, saying it would be good for networking. I smiled, agreed, and thanked her like it was a casual favor. She didn't know she'd just opened the door to everything I'd been building toward. I spent days preparing. My dress was simple but striking, dark silk that caught the light with every move. The kind of look that demanded attention without asking. I wanted Dean to see me and remember the woman he called street garbage. I wanted him to choke on the sight of me standing in his world, perfectly composed. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and soft music. Laughter drifted between polished walls as servers glided through the crowd. I stepped inside, calm but alert, the envelope tucked neatly into my clutch. Inside it were copies of the charity records, proof that Dean's philanthropy was a mask for personal gain. Nova waved me over, delighted. "You look amazing, Lena. I'm so glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, giving her a warm smile. From across the room, I saw Dean. His posture screamed confidence, his tux immaculate. Eli stood nearby, trying to look important, while avoiding conversation with investors, who clearly didn't take him seriously. Neither of them noticed me yet. I spent the first hour blending in, shaking hands, making light conversation. Every so often, I'd catch Dean's voice echoing across the room, boasting about leadership, community, integrity. The words tasted false, even from a distance. When the lights dimmed and the host announced Dean's presentation, the room quieted. He took the stage, all charm and arrogance. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate generosity and progress. Together, we've built something that changes lives." Applause followed, but I barely heard it. I moved to the back of the room, near the investor tables, where the press packets were stacked. I slipped the envelope among them, marked with Dean's own foundation seal. Minutes later, whispers began spreading, soft at first, then sharper. Pages turned, eyes widened. Someone gasped quietly. The documents told the story clearly. Donations rerouted, funds misused, signatures that didn't match. Dean kept talking, unaware. Eli noticed first, the way people were suddenly looking down instead of at the stage. Confusion flickered in his eyes. He nudged his father, whispering something urgent. Dean faltered mid-sentence. "What's happening?" he hissed, his smile twitching. A man near the front raised one of the papers. "Dean, would you care to explain this?" The room went silent. Cameras turned. Dean's face drained of color as he scanned the documents someone handed him. Eli stood frozen beside the stage, his composure crumbling. I watched from the crowd, expression calm, drink in hand. No one looked at me. They were too focused on the chaos unraveling at the podium. Dean stammered through excuses, claiming misunderstandings, clerical errors, anything to keep control. But the damage was already done. As murmurs grew louder, I caught Eli's eyes from across the room. Recognition flashed there. He knew. He just didn't know how. I turned away, my pulse steady. I walked out before the crowd erupted, heels clicking against the marble floor. The night air outside was cool and quiet. Behind me, the empire Dean had built on arrogance and lies was beginning to collapse, piece by piece. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. Within days, the news broke. Dean's empire, once spotless and admired, was under investigation for financial misconduct. Headlines spread fast: charity fraud, embezzlement, falsified records. The same people who once shook his hand now turned their backs. His foundation's website went dark, his investors withdrew, and the glossy image he'd spent years crafting began to crumble. Eli tried to reach me, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. His name appeared in every article as the operations manager who failed to report irregularities. He wasn't accused directly, but he was close enough to take part of the fall. His career, his reputation, everything tied to his father, gone. I saw clips of Dean on television, his charm replaced by a nervous stiffness. Reporters cornered him with questions about the missing donations, and his answers grew weaker each time. The man who once commanded every room now looked small, defensive, desperate. And then, just like I knew he would, he turned on his son. In one interview, he said, "My son oversaw the accounts." I trusted him completely. If there were mistakes, they weren't mine. That single line split their bond in half. Eli, who had lived his whole life under his father's thumb, suddenly became the scapegoat. I didn't celebrate it with a smile or satisfaction. I just watched it happen, knowing it was inevitable. The truth always finds its way out when built on arrogance. Nova reached out a few days later. Her message was short but heavy. You were right about them. I've cut ties. I can't be part of that anymore. She didn't ask questions. Maybe she suspected I'd known more than I let on, but she respected the silence between us. I was grateful for that. She'd been kind, and I didn't want her dragged into the wreckage. I followed the story from a distance, reading only enough to see how far they fell. Eli's resignation hit the news first. Then came the photographs, him outside his office building, boxes in his hands, eyes blank. Dean disappeared from public view soon after, the mansion rumored to be on the market. There was no joy in seeing it unfold, only a quiet balance settling back into place. I hadn't forged anything or twisted the truth. All I did was open the curtain and let their own actions speak. They destroyed themselves long before I stepped in. I just gave the world a clear view. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about how differently things could have gone if respect had existed at that dinner table. If Dean had shown decency. If Eli had chosen courage. But they hadn't, and now every choice they made was catching up to them. I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, and felt a calm I hadn't known in months. There was no revenge left to seek, only the truth, standing tall where their lies used to live. It was late when I heard the knock, slow, heavy, insistent. For a moment, I thought it was my imagination, but then it came again, harder this time. I opened the door and froze. Eli stood there, eyes red, clothes wrinkled, rain clinging to his hair. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice rough. I didn't move. "You shouldn't be here." He stepped closer, ignoring the words. "You did this to me, didn't you? You wanted to see me fall." I crossed my arms. "You fell all on your own." He laughed, bitter and hollow. "You think you're better than me now? You destroyed my life, Lena. My job, my family. Everything's gone." I stayed silent, watching the anger twist across his face. He wanted a reaction, the kind that would make him feel powerful again. I refused to give it. "I didn't ruin anything," I said finally. "Your father's greed and your silence did that. You both built your world on lies, and it collapsed exactly the way it was supposed to." He flinched like I'd hit him. "You think I wanted this? You think I liked being under his control?" His voice cracked, a mix of fury and despair. "I tried to fix things. I tried to make him proud." "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You were so busy trying to please him, you forgot who you were. You let him decide how you treated everyone else, including me." He shook his head, pacing like a trapped animal. "You don't understand what it's like. He never respected me unless I did what he wanted. I was just trying to survive." I watched him unravel, the same man who once hid behind confidence, now breaking apart in front of me. "You survived by standing on other people's backs," I said. "And when it came time to choose, you chose comfort over decency." He stopped pacing, eyes wet. "I still love you," he said suddenly. The words came out like a confession, quiet but desperate. "I messed up, but I love you." I never stopped. For a moment, I just looked at him, the man who had watched me be humiliated, who had lied, cheated, and begged for forgiveness only when his world fell apart. I felt no warmth, no ache, just clarity. "Love isn't enough," I said softly. "You can say it 1,000 times, but it means nothing without respect. And you don't even know what that looks like." He swallowed hard. "So that's it." "That's it," I said, voice steady. "You wanted me to play small so you could feel big. That's not love, Eli. That's fear." He stood there for a long time, rain dripping from his sleeves, silence stretching between us. Finally, he stepped back. His shoulders slumped, his expression hollow. When the door closed behind him, the quiet felt heavier than before, but it wasn't painful anymore. It was final. Months passed quietly, the kind of peace that doesn't rush in but slowly settles, like dust after a storm. My life found rhythm again. I poured myself into work, taking extra hours, finally chasing the promotion I'd once set aside to make room for Eli's world. The emptiness he left wasn't loneliness anymore. It was space. Space for something real, something that belonged entirely to me. Mornings started with coffee at my mom's kitchen table. She'd smile when I walked in, proud without needing to say it. For the first time in years, we laughed like we used to about small things, easy things. She never asked about him. She didn't need to. She saw the calm in me and knew the answer. The city felt different too. Streets that once reminded me of pain now felt alive again. I'd pass the restaurant where Eli and I had our first date and feel nothing but distance. It was strange how healing could feel so ordinary. No big moments, no grand declarations, just quiet freedom. One evening, after a long day, I turned on the news while cooking dinner. The familiar name hit me before I even looked up. Dean Whitmore speaks out after financial scandal. His voice came through the speakers, rehearsed and tired. He sat beside Eli in a stiff interview setting, both of them dressed like they were trying to look respectable again. The screen showed headlines about new business ventures, second chances, and public redemption. Eli's face was thinner, older somehow. The confidence that once filled every word had vanished. Dean spoke in circles, trying to sound humble, but the cracks in his charm showed. They weren't powerful anymore. They were just men trying to rewrite the story. I stood there for a moment, wooden spoon in hand, watching them search for sympathy they'd never find. There was no satisfaction, no bitterness, just quiet understanding. They had destroyed themselves long before I ever stepped in. I turned off the TV, set my plate on the table, and sat by the window. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass, soft and steady. The air smelled like rain, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed then faded away. I took a deep breath and felt completely still. Everything they'd said, everything they'd tried to make me feel, it no longer mattered. I hadn't needed revenge through cruelty or noise. I'd let the truth do its work, and it had been enough. My mom called from the hallway, asking if I'd be home for Sunday dinner. Wouldn't miss it, I said, smiling. When I finally turned out the lights and let the quiet fill the room, the thought came easily, clear as the night outside. They called me street garbage, but I turned out to be the storm that swept their world clean. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away, or should I have given them another chance? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories.